Okay, it's going.
Cool.
Okay.
So we pretty much all had to do the same thing this week, except for the only difference is like not all of us read the same chapter book.
Yeah.
Okay. I see.
Was sorry, I have all my notes like scattered. I'm
Yeah,
trying.
same. I really liked all of the videos that we had to watch. I thought that what was it, the Carly's Cafe one and the one where she was also like on the doctors, I found that super interesting because you don't really ever see that perspective or point of view very often.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I thought that was interesting because you see all the time, especially like in the video where it was like her dad was making all her decisions for her, and she was in her head just saying like how she didn't want to do anything that he wanted her to do. She wanted to
Mm-hmm.
be more independent, but she's like, I'm trapped in a body that won't let me be more independent as I want to.
I kind of related that video to the facilitated communications one, the one when she was like with the doctors, because
Mhm.
like her responses to the doctor's questions were super in depth and they were very like they had emotion behind them. So it just made me think like, is this one of the cases where the client, being Carly, is the one who isn't really being heard? It's the whatever they called it, the actual facilitator.
Mhm.
Because they were talking about how like most of the time it's cherry picking qualitative research rather than quantitative research, and like what would that be in Carly's situation, and when do we know when facilitated communication devices are actually being used properly, like for our students, you
Yeah.
know? How do we know that's their thinking instead of the aide that's in the classroom with them or something?
Right. Yeah. That's a good muddy question, I feel like. Like how are we supposed to know if that's their voice that we're hearing or if it's just
Yeah.
I think that's a good one.
Especially if we're so unfamiliar with that technology and how it's really being used with the student. And I mean, I guess it's all a game of like ask as many questions as you can, but still, you're never really going to know.
Mhm.
Mm. I found it interesting in the evaluating children's literature and the part where it's talking about the research that was found, how like so many parents and professionals or teachers, whatever, don't use books that touch on special needs just because they don't know how to appropriately incorporate them. It's like, why wouldn't you have those conversations with your colleagues about how to do that? Like, are they just too scared and have never been like taught how to research that type of thing, or what? It just makes me wonder, like, why is that fear stopping them from reaching all of their students?
Yeah. And when I was reading that too, like I found it kind of frustrating because it said that like a lot of teachers that do use like books that feature people that have disabilities, they only usually use it if they have a student in their class that happens to have a disability. They don't use it with like a classroom with students that don't have any. I feel like it's very important either way for them to like develop
Yeah.
that like sense of empathy and
I think
understanding.
yeah, I think that article kind of touched on that too, is that like I guess like in the future they like I guess if they don't have that exposure they kind of develop that negative stereotype because it's like found in society everywhere that we have that negative stereotype of people with disabilities or just people that are different from us in general. And it was saying that like they'll grow up and be like and encounter situations with people who have disabilities and then they'll treat them negatively or with disrespect because that's like they're different. They don't know how else to treat them like that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's really good to like incorporate those materials so that they can encounter like, you know, a diverse, I don't know, like they can see people that are different from them in a situation early on, so they can learn that like it's okay for people to be different, instead of just like putting it to the side and building up these negative things that we hear from others, and then going into a situation like in the what would you do video type thing, you know.
Yeah. I loved that video. I remember I actually saw that episode a long time ago and it actually aired and it like blew my mind. How so many people just completely ignored it happening. Frustrating.
Yeah.
I found it really frustrating that the teacher was the only one
Yeah.
to step up. It's like, yeah, we want, like, that's what we want from the teacher, but she shouldn't be the only one doing that. Like, just like this class has taught us, that you can always relate to someone's experience in some sort of way, most likely. And if you can't relate to them, you can learn from them and see a different perspective and try and put yourself in their shoes.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so shocking that, like, they would shake their heads clearly like they didn't like what was going on in the grocery store, yet they weren't going to say anything about it.
What really like made me angry, like when I was watching it, like so many people just kept saying, I don't think it's my place to like intervene. I'm like, then when is it your place to intervene? When is it not your place to intervene?
Yeah.
Like, it's just gonna keep on happening if you don't try to stop it. You know?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too, like that more people would stand up when it was like the teenage boy that was being disrespectful than like when the woman was being disrespectful. People just kind of like step back, and did anybody even stand up to her? Like,
I think
it
a
was just,
couple people, maybe.
yeah. But it was just interesting to see like when there's different people who are doing that, like some people are more likely to stand up, or I don't know. It was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like the difference between that big, intimidating guy and the teenagers, it's like everyone seems so scared to, like, tell him to stop. When it was the teenagers, they were just like, well, it was almost like they were thinking, oh, they're young, so they need to be told what to do. But in reality, like, teenagers know that that's wrong to be calling people like that.
Yeah.
I'll be right back. Sorry, my doorbell just rang.
Okay. Hmm. Oh, I really like the including Samuel video. I don't know if any of you guys watched, like, I feel like I watched the full movie of it in like the sped class early on that we had to take. Did anyone else see it?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved that movie. You guys read Wonder or like Rules?
I read Wander.
I read Wonder too. Sorry. I'm babysitting my little cousin. She's just watching her iPad.
Oh no, it's fine.
Yeah, I read Rules. I don't know which one everyone else read.
Okay, yeah, I read Rules too. Rules too. I enjoyed the book.
So you guys said that Rules was about a kid with autism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what end of the spectrum would he be at? Like, more serious spectrum, or?
The book doesn't really say it at all. Honestly, for me, like, I didn't really like the book because it was the perspective of David's older sister, Catherine. And I don't have a book with me, but, like, I just felt like throughout the whole book, she kind of sees her brother as having a deficit, and I don't know if other people who've read this book feel the same way, but I feel like not she only accepted him for who he was and how he was until the very end.
Yeah, that
She
irritated.
was always super ashamed of him and like wanted her friends to like him, but then didn't want him to like go and hang out with her and her friends. And I don't think it talked a lot about him and his autism. It talked more about how she deals with having a brother with autism. And I don't know, it was kind of interesting to me because I looked up the author, and she has two children, and one of them has autism, and so it makes me wonder if that book was like proofread by her other child that doesn't have autism, and if that like closely relates to how they're feeling. It just makes me wonder how, as a mom, like she portrayed David to be that way, because I just felt like it was a lot of negative stuff. I don't know how other people felt about it.
Yeah, I definitely feel like she could have incorporated more positive things. I feel like I thought there was going to be like a more gradual like evolution of her like finally being like, no, I'm not ashamed of my brother, but that never happened. Yeah, that never happened until the very end,
hmm
which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, a lot of the book was like focused with her and Jason, another character who's like in a wheelchair and can't talk. So he like points to words in his book, and she really likes to draw, so she would make him new words and then draw him a picture. So it was kind of like her learning to accept David through her conversations with Jason, because she was also ashamed of Jason and would like hide him from her friends too. Which I guess I feel like it could be very real situations for people. I wouldn't know, but I just feel like the book could have talked more than just that.
Right. It could have gone like more above and beyond, like deeper into the whole
Yeah.
situation.
I read Wonder, and I felt like Wonder really did a good job at meeting all the positive points of what to look for in children's lit that talks about special needs. And it was really cool because, like, I would say the first quarter of the book was from the main character Augie's perspective. And then there were smaller sections from each of the perspectives of, like, the students surrounding him. And he had a best friend, Summer, who was like really, really nice to him, really understood everything, completely like treated him like normal, everything like that. And then there was another kid, Jack, and there's also, I think his name was Jillian or something. And they were both like, he thought Jack was his friend at first, but then found out that Jack kind of wasn't his friend and didn't think of him in a positive light. So, but it really like focused on person first language instead of like, oh, he has like deformities in his face. And I like how the book never shows like a picture, never tells us exactly what he looks like. It just kind of lets us interpret what he may look like.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I would recommend this book for anyone wanting to use it, just because it does show both sides.
Yeah, I really liked it. I liked that it, like you were saying, like it shows all the different like perspectives of like the people that are in his life, you know. And the picture thing I really like too. Like the cover is just like the eye. Like
Yeah.
yeah. I really liked it.
And I had one, like, what was my wonder or whatever? I was wondering, like, when it was Jack's, like, part in the book, and when he was getting asked by the principal, I can't remember if it explained why he ended up going, but, like, taking it from Jack's point of view, like, that's what a lot of our students, I think, are going, especially in like, the younger grades, when they first being introduced to a student with special needs, like they are going to have a lot of the same like of Jack's feelings, and just he's wondering a lot about Augie and how his life goes and not quite sure how to talk to him best and how to communicate with him. And I think this book is a good example that it's okay to wonder those things, but you also need to explore that more with your students and not just leave it at the wonder. But like how do we address that for our students before, because these kids knew about that Augie was coming before school even started. So like how do we address that in our classroom, you know, so our students don't show like negative emotions or anything. I don't know. I think that would be something that's really difficult to do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Haida, what do you think about the book? You read Wonder, didn't you?
I think she's on mute.
Uh-oh.
She looks frozen to me.
Okay, do we want to talk about In My Language video? I think that video was super interesting.
Yeah, I found that really interesting too.
Yeah.
I talked about this in my gut reaction, but I skipped the beginning of the video. It was because I was like listening to it and typing out my thoughts and then just like waiting for it to get at a place where I felt like I could understand, and I was super confused because I was like, I don't know if Joy got the video link wrong, like I just wasn't sure, because her description of the video before it just like didn't, I mean, not that it needed to be explained, but I was just kind of confused on what I was watching, so I skipped through it until there was the subtitles like at the bottom, and then I felt really bad at the end because I was like, oh dang, I did exactly like what the person in the video said that people do, like unless unless they talk in a language that we can understand, we see her as deficit, and yet for us to not try to understand her language is seen as very normal, and the sounds that I was hearing at the beginning was her native language, and for me to so easily dismiss it like that, I felt really bad, but I think it's why I talked about it in my gut reaction, because it was a very honest like reaction of mine, and it just questions what our conception of normal is, because for that person in the video, like everything that she does is normal, but just because it differs from what society sees as what is normal, she is seen as less than. And like for me and for anyone else, like who are we to judge or say that anyone is less than based on their disabilities? So I feel like out of all of the 4 videos, that one's the one that I learned the most out of.
Yeah,
it was super interesting.
Right at the beginning of that video, I started doing exactly what she said, like most people do. I started trying to figure out the meaning of like her actions, like what they were, like, does this have a deeper meaning? What is she doing with this? And what is she trying to say to me? But then, like, she went on to explain how it's not something that, like, we can't be looking for those specific meanings. I don't know. It was hard to understand, but, like, I did exactly what she said that I would do throughout watching the beginning of it.
So did I.
What else do we have? Did you guys already talk about including Samuel?
We talked about how we saw it in our SPED class. I just think after this module, it just makes me really mad because, like, in our elementary education program, like, we're only required to take 1 special ed class, and our program is, like, 3 years long.
Yeah.
And then I remember my professor always being super stressed out because she was like, I'm the only teacher that's ever going to teach you about special ed if some of you aren't planning on going to grad school for this stuff. And she was so stressed out because she didn't want to overload us, but the content that she was trying to teach us was so important to her, and for good reason, that she was always super stressed out. And I feel like it's kind of sad and frustrating to me that that's the only experience that we get on such an important topic, as we can see from this week's module. Like, I was super surprised by how many educators didn't know how to help the students. I think it was in the Including Samuel documentary where the teachers were like, oh, I have no idea what to do, and I cry about my class almost every day.
Mhm.
But I also understand that it was the very first time that it was integrated with kids with disabilities and kids without disabilities, so that might be why. But I just feel like Woodring needs to better prepare us for teaching students with disabilities, because I feel very unprepared going into my student teaching next year.
Yeah, I agree.
Riley, did you happen to have Omni?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, it was great. I think that was probably one of my favorite classes I've ever taken. I feel like I learned the most from that class than I have from quite a few of my other classes.
Mhm.
It was just jam-packed full of information, really useful stuff.
Yeah. Should we talk about Blaska's study?
Oh, yeah.
I can't believe that 57% of the research or whatever that they did, 57% of them didn't have any books on disability or illness. That's crazy to me. It makes me want to go into all of the practicums that I've been in and look through their libraries and see what they actually have. And what was it? Only 1.4 of the nearly 2,000 books had inclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a major cop-out because I feel like the main reason why they said they didn't have any books is because they didn't know how to include them properly, which I think is a total cop-out. You need to make the effort to learn how to use them appropriately, because that's definitely something that needs to happen. You can't just not include them for that reason.
Have you guys seen the movie on Netflix called Autism in Love?
No, but I need to watch that one.
It's a really good one. It's about these couples who are autistic, both partners, and it's it really puts a different perspective in their lives and how they are exactly the same as us. They go through the same, one of the rules from that article was people with disabilities have the same sexual needs and attachments as other people there. And that movie does a really great job at showing that. So I would recommend to watch that. You would definitely have to be, I would say, late middle school or high school to show that to students, but I think it's a really great perspective to show.
Yeah, even just before we signed on to this, I was watching. I can't remember the name of the show, but I saw a commercial for it. It was all about. I think they all had Down syndrome, and it kind of follows all these different people's lives, and it especially in the commercial, it talked about how people told them they couldn't amount to anything, or they couldn't do this or that because of having Downs, and it just seemed like a really cool show to watch. I'll have to figure it out and message you guys about it because it looked really good show.
Yeah.
We are at 24
Was
minutes.
that new show on TLC, Caitlin?
I think it's on TLC. If not, it's on a channel that's fairly similar.
For that extra resource, which one did you guys use?
I did mine on Dolly Gray Award for Characters with Developmental Disabilities. So it was it's an award that was created to award any children's authors or illustrators or publishers that include characters with disabilities in them, and accurately and appropriately does it. And it kind of reminded me of that module where there was awards created that included people of color in the children's books, and it's sad. I mean, it's good that there's awards out there for those types of things, but it's sad that there needs to be awards in the first place. It just kind of shows how much of our society is bent towards the majority, and the minorities is just like super hard to find resources until classes like these. Because if I'm being honest, I didn't even realize that how little our children's books talks about or has characters of disabilities in them until I saw Blaska's study.
Mhm.
But that was my article.
Did anyone else read? I had looked up the Looking After Lewis book, and I actually found an online reading of it, and it's the book is in the perspective of a different student and another, like one student in their class. It doesn't say exactly what they have, but the lady who was reading it, she was a teacher, but she gave the stereotypical like view of what people view people with disabilities to sound like. When Lewis would talk, she would give him like a robot slow voice, and that just like really made me angry. And I was like, you introduced yourself as a teacher and you're reading this book for inclusion, yet you're stereotyping Lewis. Like, you don't know what he sounds like. He could sound completely different and completely normal. And then the book was also like, I think the book was a complete non-example because they don't use, well, they do use person first language, but they put like the ordinary actions as heroic movements for people with disabilities. Like, he touched the ball once in one of the soccer games throughout the book, and the entire team like stopped and like cheered for him and acted like it was a huge deal. And that, I feel like, didn't go along with that first article of how to evaluate those books.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end it says, she's like, I think we're allowed to break the rules for special people. Like, I just don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that's like the best message that you could be sending. And the teacher who the little girl said that to was like, totally agreed with her, and I just don't think it was a very good book. I'm guessing Joy put that one in there as a purposeful non-example, but I don't know.
We need 2 more money questions.
Something I was kind of wondering when watching the Including Samuel video is like if that would, well, I kind of think it would be, if it would be appropriate to like show that maybe at least the clip, or if not the whole movie, to your student. Because like it had the perspective of like the other students in Sam's class, and I feel like that would be kind of good for them to see, as well as like the relationship between Sam and his brother and like his family in that perspective. But I don't know what you guys think.
I feel like it'd be okay to watch it. I feel like it would be a good
Probably
resource for discussion.
I feel like we always talking about like including lots of like good authentic like literature, but I feel like it would be good to
like
have a visual
middle
example.
school age or above. That could work.
Middle school age or above, is that what you said, Haida? Oh no. But another question that I had is like looking over the guidelines for evaluating the children's literature, like do those bend at all for certain students? Like, because I feel like so many times you do see little achievements being celebrated as heroic movements in classroom. So like when are those meant to be bent or amended, I guess, would be my question.
Can you say that one more time?
When are the rules or guidelines from evaluating the children's lit article meant to be amended or bent to support certain students?
Okay.
Something along those lines. You can tweak it if you want.
Okay, and we're at 30 minutes.
Cool. Is that 3 questions?
Yep.
Mm. Cool.
Okay.